Let's just rip the Band-Aid. The Wii U was a failure. Over the course of 4.5 years, the console limped along until passing the generational baton to the much more successful Nintendo Switch. In fact, as the name implies, the Wii U was the successor to the extremely popular Wii console, which had everyone from toddlers to retirement homes swinging Wiimotes around the globe and cracking over 100 million in sales, while the Wii U would retain less than 14% of that audience before exploding once again, now over 141 million units with the Nintendo Switch. So today we're going to discuss why the Wii U, not bad timing, not shifting demographics, but the Wii U itself and its myriad of subpar features and mediocre games left many a console sitting on store shelves for an entire generation. It's not a happy story. In fact, it concludes with one of the most devastating tragedies in the whole of video game history. But it's an important lesson Nintendo is still reeling from to this day. The late 2000s was a complex time for Nintendo. On the one hand, the company had corrected the ship from the Nintendo GameCube and into the new and thrifty Nintendo Wii, as well as the immensely popular Nintendo DS line of handhelds. Being a conservative company, Nintendo opted to invest into what is famously known as their war chest, a business term with dramatic flair, but one that simply means saving rather than spending, and as we'll come to see, is one of the only reasons a story like the Wii U could even play out for as long as it did. But this was also a good practice, as the company had seen sizable shifts in positions of power. Satoru Iwata had become the president in 2002, but given the nature of technology, his real influence wouldn't be felt for several more years. And with his first successes, the DS and Wii printing money, the company decided to expand their life cycle into the next console generation, with consumer-friendly backwards compatibility, not only for software, but hardware as well, a practice that remains uncommon to this day. The DS would become the 3DS, and the Wii would become the Wii U, an easy transition. But in an effort to add some contemporary flair, this new handheld would include glasses-free 3D technology, and the home console would borrow from the DS and from Apple's new iPad line, and include a tablet-like gamepad. Nintendo had seen what people had liked, and they had added a new fun twist. But a funny thing happened on the way to the Wii U. The 3DS launched and bombed right out of the gate. It turns out the idea of glasses-free 3D was far more divisive than they had anticipated. In the era of late-night launches, the 3DS had failed to accumulate enough pre-orders to keep GameStops open past midnight. Nintendo had entered panic mode, slashing prices nearly a quarter, and that perception certainly didn't help the Wii U gamepad's debut at E3 2011. A good deal of the audience understood this would become the next console, certainly, but it was rather telling how a small but still noticeable portion believed it would be an accessory for the current Wii console, a troubling sign for things to come. Flash forward another year, and E3 2012 was Nintendo's full-throated commitment to the Wii U, and on paper they certainly seemed prepared. A wall of third-party publishers and developers had signed on. Some of the newest games like Call of Duty Black Ops 2 would be appearing as launch titles, as well as third-party exclusives such as Zombie U. For a game-centric event like E3, this would appear to be an easy win, especially after generations of Nintendo consoles being labeled as kiddie systems. Here you could have the Wii or the Xbox 360, all in one console. But as Nintendo outlined its plan to a live audience, it was as if every strength turned into a weakness within minutes of its reveal. According to those who attended the event, some people could be heard shouting Wii U to imitate the sound of an ambulance, becoming a sort of local meme. Meanwhile, even more viewers confused this completely new generation of hardware as an accessory for the already existing Wii. Mockery and confusion are generally not the goal of a stage presentation, and it was becoming obvious the more exposure the Wii U received, Nintendo had made a serious miscalculation. On November 18, 2012, a brand new Nintendo console launched, but it sure didn't feel like it. Stores across North America, from Target to Kmart, and hobbyist stores opened their gates to empty parking lots or modest lines who could freely come and go without ever purchasing a console, to perhaps return another day, as it was clear they weren't going anywhere. The Wii U came in two variants, an 8GB unit for $300 or a 32GB model with a copy of Nintendo Land for $350. But for the sake of clarity, we're going to be referring to the 32GB model going forward, as Nintendo eventually discontinued the 8GB model after putting the 32GB model at the $300 price point. And this also means, technically, the Wii U never received a price cut, staying at $300 until its discontinuation in 2017. 2019, an increasingly contentious point as our story goes on. But by launch date, Nintendo was already battling against public apathy. Nintendo Land, essentially this generation's Wii Sports, was a collection of Nintendo-themed minigames which took advantage of the gamepad for one player, while the rest used a mix of controllers and Wiimotes. As most will attest, it's a darn good time, sure to induce plenty of giggles in group play. But unlike Wii Sports, it had absolutely no long-term pull for single players. And unless you were somehow in a setting with several available and enthusiastic players, Nintendo Land simply didn't have the staying power or universal recognition of sports, and it simply looked like another video game to an outsider. Educated players also didn't see the reason to buy a Wii U, especially with its launch titles. Mass Effect 3, the third game in a series whose main selling point is you can carry over your saves from the previous two games, neither of which were available on the Wii U. Batman Arkham City Armored Edition, the same game from the previous year, a stone cold classic to be sure, but one that had already been experienced, except now with some odd electric gimmicks. Care to buy a console for that? Most people didn't. But the Wii U was committed to the future, right? After all, the Wii had missed out on plenty of games, but now that the Wii U and its HD power were here, it would have plenty of parity with its console peers. Well, no. Within a handful of months of the Wii U's launch, Sony and Microsoft both outlined their plans for the true next generation of consoles, with the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. And by the first anniversary of the Wii U, when a console should be picking up more momentum, the Wii U was seemingly gassed by the horsepower of these new platforms. And with the PlayStation 4's $400 price tag, a shy $50 from the 32GB Wii U, well, you can see why they had to get rid of that 8GB model. That's not to take away from the great games on the Wii U, of which yes there are some, most of which found their way to the Nintendo Switch, such as New Super Mario Bros. U, Super Mario Bros. 3D World, Mario Kart 8, Bayonetta 2, Super Mario Maker, The Wonderful 101, and more. And let's not forget, the Wii U did give us the first Splatoon, the sadly underseen and underplayed Xenoblade Chronicles X, and the adorable gamepad-centric affordable space adventure. But make no mistake, the Wii U is also home to some of the darkest chapters of Nintendo franchises. For instance, Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival, a haphazard board game which used the new Amiibo figurines, a bad game in groups, a horrible game to play alone. Something with a touch more merit is Devil's Third, an action third-person game so aggressively weird, we assume it was attempting to ape the Kosugi subculture of Japan of enjoying bad games. Cool if you understand what that means, but not exactly the next Just Dance in terms of sales. Even seemingly sure things like Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, a game where you draw a line on the gamepad, a follow-up to a great Nintendo DS game, arrived feeling slower and charmless. In fact, there was a general feeling among Wii U owners that Nintendo was already ready to move on after the first couple of years, and the projects in development were suffering from a tightening of belts. Paper Mario Color Splash felt downright sparse compared to previous Paper Mario RPGs. Game & Wario, the latest offbeat minigame collection, arrived without nearly the presentation players had expected of the game within a game. Even Platinum Games struck out with the lackluster motion-sensitive Star Fox Zero. There's a reason this one didn't make it to the Nintendo Switch. And ultimately, this is the legacy of the Wii U, the worst games in classic series. Ideas that fans could see clearly fitting within the console, but arriving with lesser budgets. Even third-party games such as Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric more or less arrived DOA, and better reviewed third-party games like Zombie U jumped ship for other platforms. While users are often passionate to see their favorites do better, the Wii U's failure chilled the fandom to the bone. The 3DS had already bounced back and had become the hardware of choice for Nintendo fans, while also becoming another major financial success for Nintendo. But the Wii U would never recover, failing to reach 14 million in its life cycle. And this is where the conversation must turn to some rather uncomfortable subjects. After reporting health problems related to his bile duct, Nintendo president Satoru Iwata continued to work well into his treatment, helping to guide his collaborators and even his successors towards the next generation and the Nintendo Switch. To even attempt to cover Mr. Iwata's contributions in this video would be to derail the topic entirely, but it must be said, Iwata's decades of work are much more varied and creative than his final years. Nor is this to imply some sort of lack of intelligence or empathy. In fact, Iwata recognized the failure of the Wii U as his responsibility, making the decision to give himself a 50% pay cut to avoid letting go of Nintendo employees. However, in this story, Iwata, Miyamoto, and many respected figures owners were often the targets of criticism. When the Xbox One removed the albatross that was the Kinect, Wall Street investors called for the Wii U to ditch the costly and underused gamepad. Nintendo refused. And this only became more strange as one by one, many of the functions built into the Wii U and the gamepad were being altered or entirely removed, including Nintendo TV, a built-in TV guide, which was removed less than 3 years from launch. In fact, in the Q&A section under the question, "Why are you shutting down Nintendo TV?" the answer said, "Every service has a life cycle, and it's time to focus on our resources on other projects." A touch awkward seeing as the gamepad had a dedicated TV button. When asked where the popular franchises like Zelda were, Miyamoto explained how difficult it was to make HD games, a comment which didn't impress many Wii U owners looking at the PlayStation 4. It can be shocking to review the stiff comments calling for Iwata to resign from both fans and Wall Street investors. Nevertheless, Iwata pushed through, working until the end. But on July 11th, the conversation would take a sharp twist when it was revealed Iwata had passed away from a strenuous form of cancer. Overnight, calls for his firing turned to tributes. While far from as significant as life and death, Nintendo were still stuck with a lame duck console on their hands. But beyond Virtual Console and the eShop, the support for the Wii U was sporadic at best. Major developers had long ditched the console for the robust power and sales of Sony and Microsoft. In fact, Nintendo officially switched off the lights for the Wii U on January 31st, 2017. While the online services and support would extend for several more years, Nintendo would be officially out of the console market for at least a couple of months. And thankfully for Nintendo fans, this story does have a happy ending. The Nintendo Switch launched shortly thereafter and defied naysayers from around the globe calling for Nintendo to go third party. In fact, there's a very strong chance you, dear viewer, own at least one Nintendo Switch, as it sold over 141 million units at last check. That's over 10 times the Wii U. And sure, it's not quite fair. After all, Nintendo essentially merged the handheld and console markets together, declining a successor to the 3DS. Call it a shift in the landscape, but we don't see these same issues for Sony or Microsoft, which begs the question, what would the future of Nintendo home consoles have been had the Wii U been a success? We may have not only seen a different outcome for home consoles, but the handheld market as well. As we've already mentioned, the 3DS bounced back. The Wii U didn't. So it's not unreasonable to say the Wii U also helped end the handheld Nintendo market. But of course, these are all hypotheticals. What can't be disputed, however, is the existential threat that was the Wii U. Because as we've discussed early on, Nintendo had anticipated their risks may one day not pay off. And rather than creating additional expenses, they invested in their war chest, their savings. Had this been any other traditional console manufacturer like Sega or SNK, they no doubt would have been compromised beyond repair. And it's to the credit of Mr. Iwata that he wisely saved those funds from the Wii and DS generation. As the Nintendo name quite literally translates to, leave luck to heaven. Wise words to live by, even wiser words to run a company. But now it's your turn. What did you think of the Wii U? Did you notice any of these issues back in the day? Or were you too busy playing games? Let us know in the thread below, and we'll be sure to read your answers. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video, so keep clicking around here on Game Rant, and we'll see you next time.